Welcome back to Normal Island. I'm Curtis Daly, and by popular demand, I'm wearing a blazer again. I promise I won't let you down again. And tonight, I'm of course joined by Turn Left contributor Sarah DeLau. Sarah, how's your Friday been? And it's the weekend.
Yeah, I know. I'm really happy it's the weekend. It's been good. It's been an intense week, but happy to be here, joined by yourself. So yeah, super excited for today's show.
Oh, do you know what? I think Fridays are going to be my favourite day because it's always going to be me and you. So
Oh,
it's the first of many.
glazing, honestly. Zero expectations to zero because Friday I'm knackered, but I'm really excited to be here.
Yeah, I think we both had a nap, didn't we?
We did.
Oops.
We did.
I didn't have that coffee actually, so I've only been on
Nor
two
did
coffees
I.
today.
Nor did I.
No.
I think we don't want to be buzzing. I think at 11 o'clock at night. I think we need a reasonable night's sleep. So coffee is not the one at this hour.
Well, I'll tell you what, there's no chance of us falling asleep because we've got some big stories to cover, and I'm excited to get into it. So, coming up on tonight's show, Reform set to defeat Labour at the next by-election, Starmer calls for a smaller state, pension cuts cause chaos in Argentina, and James O'Brien accuses a caller of anti-Semitism for asking about Sangita Myska. As always, remember to like the stream, and if you're not a subscriber, then please hit that button, as we want to reach 20,000 subs ASAP. We're nearly at 19, so we're not far off. We're also going to get to your comments at the end of the show, so make sure you are busy in that chat, because we're going to read all of them, and we're going to read some of them out. Now, on to our first story. Reform UK are set to decisively defeat Labour in the upcoming Runcorn and Helsby by-election, which, if you don't remember, was the seat held by Labour's Mike Ainsbury, who was charged with assault after beating up a constituent. Karen Shaw is the latest candidate to run, although we don't know much about her apart from the fact that she's a teacher and a councillor from Cheshire West and Chester. Now, no other party has a candidate as of yet. So, Sarah, I mean, are we hardly surprised that Labour already has a candidate? Clearly, a robust process didn't take place or any kind of democratic oversight. So what's the chances that she's another Starmer loyalist?
Interesting. I mean, so could she be a Starmer loyalist? Possibly. I think at the moment Starmer's giving people no choice but to agree with him. But I think people have been quite open about his criticisms of him, even within the party. But I think the bigger question is, does it actually matter? Because I think the reality is that with this by-election, it will be a test of Labour's ability to hold its ground in working class areas, particularly whilst the Tories kind of flounder at the moment. So I think the real fight here is between Labour and voter apathy, and not I guess, the threat that may or may not come from Reform if it does, which is more of just a right-wing pressure group rather than a serious electoral threat in seats like this. So I would hope that she's not a Starmer loyalist, but I think she kind of needs to be. But I don't think Starmer's that popular at the moment. So yeah, we'll have to see.
Yeah, I mean, I was looking at some polls, and a Lord Ashcroft poll came out, and it shows that Reform are ahead. I don't think we're too surprised about that. I think I've got the graphic there. Do you mind just hitting up graphic 3 for me, please? Showing the poll. That's it there. So it's quite a decisive lead, 5%. And this is, of course, before all candidates have been selected. And actually, the date of the by-election hasn't been decided. But my producer has also just told me that there was another poll that came up that had Labour ahead. I would say that in reality, Reform are sort of ahead, especially given the reason why this sort of by-election was called. I think, though, a potential chink in the armour is the recent civil war between the party and Rupert Lowe. I mean, do you think that could affect their chances, or do you think this this civil war, shall we say, is actually kind of overblown and electorally they'll be fine?
So yeah, I think it's interesting. It's like the civil war between Reform and Rupert Lowe.
Oh, we love to
I
see it,
think
don't we? Finally, the
I'm
right are fighting each other, so I'm really happy.
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, but the party thrives on being a bit of a protest movement. But it's also a party that's incredibly and fundamentally unstable. And Low is just the
Mm,
latest in a long line of like internal rifts within Reform itself. Richard Tice's leadership is increasingly being questioned, and Nigel Farage as well, like the party's de facto figurehead, who's more interested in boosting his own media profile rather than building this supposed party. But I use that term really loosely.
mm,
I think we need to remember that Reform is not a mass membership party in a way Labour or even the Tories are. I think it's effectively just a vanity project for a handful of like business figures that want to like invest in it. But I think even with like interpreting the polling that you've given, I think especially from sources like Lord Ashcroft, I think we have to be like quite critical because these polls are often commissioned to make a political point rather than
yeah.
make like I guess give a like a neutral snapshot of the electorate. But that being said, if Reform UK is polling ahead, then I think it says more about Tory collapse than it does about any real, I guess, groundswell of support for reform. And we've kind of seen it before, like with right wing protest parties kind of gaining this temporary boost in by-elections, but kind of failing to convert that into like a national electoral success. So I think it happened with pretty sure it happened with UKIP. Like they were polling at similar levels in the mid
Mm,
2010s,
yeah.
and then ultimately collapsed when it came to an actual general election test. So I think the same could actually happen with reform.
What's interesting, I mean, look, I think that I would say they're not a protest party. I think they have had electoral
Mm.
success. Getting 5 seats and you're essentially your first proper general election is a massive feat. What is very interesting is when you look at local council elections, the Green Party are doing phenomenal. I think they've got 800 councillors nationwide. Clearly, a more of a grassroots party. Despite the fact that Reform are polling well nationally, they're basically first place. Given the media attention, they don't get many councillors elected. So there's kind of a disconnect what's going on in the sort of local area and national sort of politics. But I would see by-elections as national politics. I know it's a local
Yeah.
seat, but when it's an MP, to me, it's about putting them into parliament. So for me, I expect Reform to win because I think it's also the trend with
I
Labour,
guess.
both Labour and Tory losing support.
Yeah.
Reform are hoovering up, and also it'd be very hard to convince people to stick with Labour when the person who lost the seat was the guy who beat up a constituent who's got
True.
how many is it got like
Yeah.
10 weeks in prison now for it?
I think
So
something like that. Yeah. I
yeah,
can't remember. But that was
but do you
that honestly breaks my heart. But we could talk about that another day. But that broke my heart. I was like, this is just not what Labour needs at all. And I don't like I root
well I
for
say fuck
Labour.
Labour, so
No, so do I.
I'm
But
like
I
fuck
like
them.
when Corbyn was running and stuff,
Yeah.
I was really invested in Labour. And then
Mm,
there was always this part of me inside that's like, come on, Labour, like please just bring it back. And I think that I need to let go of that desire that's going to happen. I don't believe that's going to happen. But you made a
yeah.
great point though.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean,
yeah,
Corbynism, or anyone vaguely left wing is never coming back in the party.
no.
But yeah, do you think that these sort of civil war things going on in Reform are they just sort of media noise, or do you think this could hurt them electorally?
This
I know it's a hard question. It's asking
No, but it's a good
hypotheticals,
question.
but
It's a good question because it's the question that I had on my mind. I wanted to ask you, like, could this infighting hurt them electorally? Possibly. I mean, unlike Labour or the Tories, who are, and I keep using these main parties, but Reform doesn't have the. I don't believe it has the infrastructure to absorb like factional disputes. I think it relies almost entirely on its public image as a united opposition to the status quo. So any sign of like internal chaos could potentially undermine the main thing that they have going for them, and that is, I guess, positing this illusion of being a coherent alternative, a cohesive alternative
hmm,
to mainstream politics, if that's the verbiage we can go with. But if reforms start looking like just another bickering political outfit, then I think they lose the one advantage that's helped them gain the traction among disillusioned Tory voters, and that is the sensationalist ideals of refugees and immigrants and the NHS. Like, because we all know they have really, really shit policies, and they've been able to kind of tap into the social resentment that many disillusioned Tory voters were feeling in the first place. So the minute they start bickering, it highlights, I think, the deeper structural weaknesses that they have, the internal disputes that are going to really, really tear apart their whole their whole image. So yeah, I think it's a risk for them, and I want to see the back of Reform. I'm sick and tired of seeing the likes of Tyson, Farage,
Yeah.
and Rupert Lowe come up on my feed sometimes. I'm like, ugh, get away from me. But
Well, you
I don't
mentioned
know.
something there coming up on your feed. That's why they're successful, because they're phenomenal
True.
on social media.
Yeah.
I also have a message from our producer, a bit of an update from the newer poll. Britain predicts modelling finds that the wards which make up the constituency, Reform would top the poll in a majority of them, 7 out of a possible 13. But not all wards are equal. Some have bigger electorates. Wrong word. Electorates. So Reform isn't necessarily topping the poll. The Britain Predicts central estimate is that if an election was held today, Labour would hold the seat with 33% to Reform's 30%. The Conservatives would languish on third on 20%. Yeah, I mean, we have to look at polls of some kind of skepticism. People have different models. But I think it's better to look at trends. And for me, if we were to look at the trends over the last year or so, I'm pretty confident Reform's going to win that. And especially, again, in this seat, their candidate, the reason why the by-election's happening is because Mike Ainsbury's in jail for beating someone up. But I think we're going to leave Reform there. We don't want to take too much of our time talking about them. So I think we're going to move on to our second story of the evening. So, after announcing the scrapping of NHS England, which puts the NHS under control of the government, Keir Starmer went on the news agents and talked about the need for a smaller state.
In politics, particularly at the moment, people need to feel the change, because there's a bigger piece here about the disconnect between politics and people, and the feeling that politics is no longer a force for good. Part of that is driven by people thinking promises are made that aren't kept. I promised 2 million extra appointments in the first year of a Labour government. We've now delivered it. That is a really important proof point.
But briefly, Prime Minister, you spoke in your speech about the size of the state. You've talked about the fact in your Telegraph article that it was 12,000 bigger in terms of headcount than it was before the referendum. Do you think simply that the state should be smaller by the end of this Parliament? Fewer people should be working for it?
Yes, I think it should be smaller, more agile. It should be active. And this is the political difference. By and large, Conservatives don't believe in the state. They think the free market should do the work. That's why they think the state should be smaller. I believe in the state. I think it should be active. I think it should be sleeves rolled up. It should be on the pitch making a difference. But at the moment, what we've got is an oversized and underpowered state, the complete opposite of the active state that I believe would make a big difference.
Okay, so as you heard there, he does justify his position by saying the Tories want a smaller state because they believe in free markets. And he wants a smaller state due to this vague notion of an agile and effective state. I mean, he's still calling for a smaller state. And his government so far has been extremely pro-privatisation. Wes Streeting is our health secretary. So, and obviously Wes Streeting, he's been given hundreds of thousands of pounds from private insurance companies. Sarah, before we get onto the policy stuff, at the beginning of that clip, Starmer talked about a disconnect between people and politics and broken promises. I mean, is he for real? The man's broken more promises than I've had hot dinners. So what do you make of that?
Is that the most ironic thing that we could possibly hear from Starmer? Like, this man has literally spent the past, I think, few years systematically wanting to break every major promise he made during his Labour leadership campaign, and now he wants us to believe he's the one to fix political distrust. I think it's actually quite laughable. I mean, we can go down the route of broken promises, like tuition fees or something he's backtracked on, public ownership of utilities. He literally promised to take essential services like water, energy and rail into public hands. Fast forward to today, and not only has he abandoned that, but his party is actively reassuring corporate investors that nationalisation is kind of off the table at the moment. Workers' rights, taxing the rich, like all of these things that were supposed to be relatively left-leaning, he's just been like, oh, yeah, actually don't resonate because I forgot I'm cosplaying as Tory. So I think, yeah, it is laughable. I think he this smaller state that we're going to get into in a little bit is definitely like a neoliberal blueprint that I want to unpack in a second once we get into his policies. But yeah, the whole idea of a smaller, agile state, definitely something I want to unpack.
I also about his promises. The ones we remember the most are the 10 pledges when he was vying for leader. But it's more shocking. Okay, I'm not shocked anymore. Let's just say that. But it's more crazy that it's the pledges he ditched whilst he was leader, or even when he got into government. So it's not like, okay, we understand he lied to the membership to get elected, but even stuff like the Green Industrial Plan, that was £28 billion a year. That's been watered down. GB Energy, which was supposed to get a substantial amount of cash every single year, they've watered that down. There's so many things in the manifesto, or the things he said just before he got elected, he's reversed on. Not from things from 5 years ago, but from things like a week ago. The guy is I think he's a pathological liar. So I think to say there's a disconnect between politicians and people, that's absolutely true. But you're part of the problem.
He's the
Keir
disconnect.
Starmer I would say Keir Starmer's a bigger liar than Boris Johnson. I fucking will say that.
God, what a statement.
It is a statement, and I stand by it.
You said I'm going to declare it as truth. And you know what? I think, yeah, absolutely. Rooted in truth. I think we have to keep a close eye on Starmer. He is so dangerous. What scares me the most is that he offered himself as this, as someone who was an alternative to Tory rule, like 14 years of austerity, 14 years of privatisation, deindustrialisation, and how the working class have really suffered. We have over 50,000 kids who are living in temporary accommodation who are literally rendered homeless as a result of Tory rule. And then you've got Starmer, who pretends that he's for working people, but he isn't. He's telling us we can't have nice things. He's stripping us from the things that would make this country better, that we have to accept further cuts and further privatization, and just with a more competent and less openly cruel face. Like, just because you smile on our faces on TV does not mean that I trust you any more or less than I would. Like,
I mean, Starmer smile gives me the creeps a little bit. I'm not gonna lie.
It does a bit, actually.
It's not even the charming one.
It's the eyes. It's the eyes. But we're on a downward spiral. Yeah. We're on a downward spiral, Starmer.
Let's unpack the more policy detail. So this smaller states thing, that's literally a Republican line and a Conservative line. They want less government when it comes to regulation, social programs, welfare. So in the US, when it comes to social security, they want to gut that. Conservatives and Labour have been cutting benefits. They've been doing that for decades. Of course, when it comes to social issues, though, the right love big government, don't they? When it comes to who you can marry or you have sex with, they love that. So Starmer calling for a smaller yet empowered state, that makes no sense to me. That just sounds like, as you said, typical free market neoliberal politics. Is there anything I'm missing? Maybe Starmer has a genius strategy, which is a so-called smaller agile state, which, I don't know, isn't free markets? Because so far all we've seen is austerity and benefit cuts. So please enlighten me. Is there this magical third thing he's got hiding?
I cannot enlighten you about what Starmer's got underneath his bloody sleeve. Like, he has me guessing.
We did say roll his sleeves up for a good government.
No, literally. Yeah. I mean, the nonsense about a smaller, agile state, like Starmer's entire justification is literally pure spin. He says the Tories want a smaller state because of free market ideology, whilst he wants it for efficiency. So what's the difference? Let's be real, Starmer. Be honest. His brand of a smaller state is functionally no different from Tory austerity. And it's classic neoliberal politics. I want people to see it for what it is. Shrink the state's ability to provide public services whilst ensuring it still has enough power to serve the interests of capital. Like, they won't shrink the state when it comes to policing and surveillance. The government will still have plenty of resources to crack down on protests, expand state surveillance, and keep the machinery of repression running. I believe that for a fact. They won't shrink the state when it comes to corporate subsidies. I don't see that's going to happen anytime soon. They're still going to find billions for tax breaks, possibly. I mean, I might be speaking out of turn here, but I just don't trust him. I don't trust this Labour government. I view them in the same light that I view the Tories. You want to serve corporate interests at this point. But what they will do is they'll shrink the state for welfare, healthcare, and workers' protection. So anything that benefits ordinary people is suddenly unaffordable. Ironic.
Yeah, I mean, in the context of Doge, where Musk and Trump are ripping up important social programs, firing Fed workers. Is it not extremely harmful that Starmer is basically doing the same? As I said, they're cutting disability benefits. They have no interest in public ownership of services. What exactly do they want the government to do? Because he keeps on saying, we want a government to work for people. I think it's pretty clear that Labour are chasing that Overton window way to the right and accepting the framing that we have a bloated government.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, I have to keep going back to these parallels of neoliberalism, because I think that's what's at the heart of it. Like, his advocacy for a reduced state apparatus literally mirrors neoliberal policies that favour diminished public spending and deregulation. And actually, you're spot on when it comes to it's in the context of those, it kind of aligns directly with that. I think that bloated government narrative indicates a significant rightward shift in like the Overton window, the range of policies that kind of are politically acceptable to the mainstream population at a given time. So that shift, I think, has redefined the political centre in one way or another. So and we have to really reinterrogate the impact that it's going to have on public services. Like, the social safety net erosion is going to be very, very evident. It's already among the weakest in developing nations, and further cuts to welfare and public services risk deepening the poverty we're already in and the social exclusion we're already in for minoritized communities. So I do think this is a rebranding of neoliberal policies that prioritizes market mechanisms over public welfare, similar to Doge. And I think that approach risks perpetuating austerity, increasing inequality, and undermining the very social fabric that I think we want a truly progressive government to have. Like, a truly progressive government should seek to strengthen our society, not weaken it even further.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point you made. It's obviously he doesn't want to change anything fundamentally, so he's rebranding neoliberalism by saying, no, I'm not free market. That's the Conservatives. I just want an agile, active state, which is also enacting the same policies of austerity. And also, Andy Carter in the chat made a really good point. He said, you want to talk about government efficiency? Get rid of all those private contracts. Because that is one thing I'm in favour of efficiency savings, is stop giving out and carving up our public services to private tender, because it's even more bureaucratic. But of course, Keir Starmer, Wes Streeting, God forbid they touch that, won't they? We're already at 8:05. We've got another 3 stories to go through, so we are going to, 2 stories to go through, so we're going to move on. But I just want to say, if you are enjoying our show, please hit that like button, hit the subscribe button. There's 65 of you watching now, so I hope you've all hit that like button. And once the show is finished, please come back and leave a comment, because it really does help with the algorithm, and of course we go through them and read them too. Remember, we are just a group of volunteers who are trying to turn this into a full media organisation where this becomes our full-time jobs. So if you'd like to support us, then you can go to turnleftmedia.co.uk/support. There you can sign up to our Patreon and support us for as little as £3 per month, or you can go to one of our other links on the website, and you can give a one-off donation too. Alternatively, you can become a member on YouTube for 99p. Okay, let's move on. Police have clashed with protesters over Javier Milei's recent decision to cut pensions. Milei, who is an extreme libertarian, has been gutting government departments because he doesn't believe in a state. His leadership has seen Argentina, plunged into poverty, with the rates increasing to 53%. So most Argentinians are in poverty. Now he set his sights on pensions, with an unlikely alliance of pensioners and football fans taking to the streets. Of course, it's the age-old story that police states use violence to combat dissent, turning the peaceful protest into chaos. We even have a shocking clip of an officer shooting at a pensioner. I mean, is that really necessary? It's insane stuff. That was a fucking shotgun as well, and just fired out a pensioner. Sarah, this feels very connected to the first story, actually, which is about, or the second story even, which is cutting government spending. Milei is basically enacting Doge on steroids. I don't think anyone can look at Argentina and see Milei is a success story, can they?
Absolutely not. This is an economy being gutted in real time. Like, and then when you look at the statistics as well, what's happening in Argentina, and people really need to like reflect on this. The fact that their poverty rates have gone from 40% to about 53%, with food insecurity being faced by many people in that country, reaching levels that have been absolutely unseen in decades. Like, and then on top of that, like that video, I had to just come off the stream because I was like, oh gosh, like that, it's just disgusting to think that this is someone who is attempting to lead a country. Like, the social fabric is being utterly destroyed, and I think he's got this shock doctrine that is wiping out all of these subsidies on transport, on energy, on food, making life so unaffordable for millions of people. I don't know how he's going to sleep at night knowing that this is what he's doing to his country, and allowing for things to plummet the way that they're plummeting.
I love your point about the shock doctrine. This is why we have you on the show. I love it. I didn't even think about that, because obviously what happened in the 70s, I think it was the 70s with in Chile, with Pinochet basically being opposed on. Of course, he introduced the shock doctrine, which is just to not slowly change things into the neoliberal realm, but completely gut things. And I think that's the same thing was happening in the US, where Trump and Musk are now saying the economy is going to suffer momentarily, but don't worry, things are going to get better. And that is, once again, enacting the shock doctrine of just gutting everything. And people then going, well, to be fair, they did say things are going to get worse before they get better. A clue, they don't get better, they get a whole lot worse. Now, to touch upon what you said earlier on, and what I find so ironic, is that these kind of politicians who want to make so-called savings, impose austerity, yet they have the money to militarize the police, have bloated military budgets. And you can be sure that Trump won't be cutting funding to the police, neither Milei, because they still need the state to enact its violence to defend these reforms, don't they?
Literally that. This is the thing though, but even with the cuts that they make, they do it under the guise of like the myth of freedom. And I think what people need to realize, that austerity at the levels that it's happening at the moment over there comes with a lot of repression. So of course, even with that video that we saw, the police crackdown on protests is no accident. Like, pensioners and football fans taken to the streets because they know that Milei's pension cuts mean that people will literally die in poverty. And what was the response? Brutal police violence, rubber bullets, tear gas, and even live ammunition. The state isn't shrinking at all. If anything, it's being restructured to serve capital. And this goes hand in hand as well with him slashing social programs, but like you said, pouring all of this money into militarization to protect his agenda. And this is exactly what dictators essentially do. They put so much money into things that will impose harm, but it's all because of their own interest. And the same goes for Trump in the US when it comes to cutting spending. It was like, it's not going to touch the bloated police and military budgets already. It's a pattern that we see again and again. Neoliberal regimes shrink the welfare state, but then expand the security state, and it's all just to protect their agenda.
Absolutely. If no one's read it before in the chat, I'm assuming a lot of you have read it or at least heard of it, is Grace Blakely's Vulture Capitalism. Excellent book. And I mean, she's not the only one to talk about this, but it's true when we talk about politicians rolling back the state or shrinking the state, neoliberalism, etc. It's not that. In fact, actually, they increase the state. One, through state repression, so it's increased, obviously, the policing, because obviously when you make huge market reforms, it creates a lot of civil unrest, so you need quite a big state to essentially defend that. But two, neoliberalism doesn't really pull the government and allow the market to take over. Neoliberalism basically manipulates the market in favor of capital. So you'll see, actually, that's why, despite austerity, debt has gone up.
Yeah,
it's gone up. Even the deficit under Trump in the first few months has gone up. Even with 14 years of Tory austerity, the debt has gone up because they're not really shrinking the state. It's just about giving more power to capital. But
sorry,
go on,
sorry,
go
I
ahead.
to cut you off, but like, don't you? It's just part of like a global right-wing playbook that they're all kind of playing into. Like, even this, I feel like all our stories kind of connect in some way or another. Like, if we think about just going back to Starmer for a sec, when he's saying about this, that the smaller state line while slashing welfare and expanding privatization, and then you've got in the US Trump pushing corporate tax cuts whilst promising an authoritarian crackdown on dissent, and then you've also got in France like Macron, who used the same economic necessity rhetoric to justify raising the retirement age against mass opposition. Like, is that not just something that's like this economic strategy that's kind of playing out across the world, or am I delusional?
No, I mean, so I was just reading a message from the producer there. I think what's so, and I don't want to bring it back to the story earlier on, but I think it's all connected. What's going on with Millet, what's going on neoliberalism and austerity, is once again it's Starmer trying to basically follow the Overton window by saying, "Oh, I think people want a smaller state." I don't think people want that whatsoever. Actually, that's why even in fact some right-wing parties understand that, Reform understand that, and that's what they're saying. We won't scrap the two-child benefit cap. We would renationalise water. Now, whether they will is a different story, but they're saying that because people are happy with an active state. But Starmer thinks, no, I'm going to follow the neoliberal line. We'll just say we're going to shrink the state. I have no problem, by the way, with a politician saying, we do have a bloated state, but we're spending it on private contracts. We're allowing our public services to be carved up and sold to the highest bidder, and this marketisation of the NHS is incredibly bureaucratic. I think we spend too much money on defence, especially if you're a US politician. The amount of money that's spent on the military is insane. We spend too much money on the police. Police officers should be your typical Bobby on the beat, not with tasers and big guns and stuff. I'm happy for them to say that, but they won't. And that's the thing. When Starmer says, I want a smaller state, he's being disingenuous, because it won't be a smaller state. It just means there's going to be less social programs and protection for the most marginalised in the community, whilst giving tax breaks to billionaires and handing out contracts to the private companies.
Exactly.
I think we're going to move on to our final story, because we're going to have a probably extended comment section, because when we bring in our producer, I think he wants to talk a little bit about Trump as well for a few minutes. So let's crack on. Radical centrist James O'Brien accused a caller of anti-Semitism for asking about Sangita Myska. Now, if you haven't heard, a while back, LBC host Sangita Myska was mysteriously fired from the show, and we still don't have an official reason, although many of us expect it to be this.
What the Iranians, of course, have said is that this is a retaliatory strike after Israel struck its consulate in Syria. Now, we all know that the way diplomacy works is consulates and embassies are considered sovereign territory of the government that is concerned. What Israel did by taking that action against Iran was escalate what is already an incredibly fragile situation.
Sangita, that's an outrageous framing of the reality.
It's not an outrageous framing. I've just been speaking to somebody who is a diplomat to Iran from the UK government. That's not an outrageous framing of it. What Israel did was strike what is considered in diplomatic circles the sovereign territory of Iran, whether we like it or not. No. And there was undoubtedly going to be a blowback. So did Israel game out what was going to happen next?
Firstly, I'm not going to speak directly to that strike. What I can say definitively, and this is why it's outrageous, I can say definitively is that wasn't an embassy, it wasn't a consulate, it wasn't any type of diplomatic mission.
It's been widely reported as that.
Because that's what Iran says. Because that's what Iran says. So would you like to copy and paste?
Are you suggesting every single news organization in the world has got that wrong?
No, I'm suggesting that the Iranians have an interest to say that was a diplomatic mission when we know definitively it wasn't. Okay, because they then want to give you the response that you've just copied and pasted, with all due respect. So I can tell you that I can't speak directly to the strike, but I can say that definitively that was an Al-Quds military base being used by by forces of the Iranian regime, and they were bent on Israel's destruction. They were working towards Israel's destruction. They were working actively with their proxies.
Well done to those of you who made it through that clip without throwing your phone at the wall. It's a very, very hard to watch. But you know, watching Israeli spokespeople squirming their way out of questions is it's common practice now. So yes, that was an Israeli spokesperson defending Israel's attack on an Iranian consulate last year. Now, James O'Brien has said before that her sacking has nothing to do with talking about Palestine, because he does it all the time, but rather due to viewing figures. But I suspect it was more of the fact that the entire mainstream media pretended that Israel was defending itself from Iran after Iran fired rockets at them last year, even though their attack on the Iranian embassy was before the rockets. Now, Myska, as I'm aware, is one of the few mainstream journalists who's called out Israel's aggression. Now, in terms of viewing figures, well, her numbers were pretty good, as you can see there. Audience up 12.5%. Average audience rises to 465,000 listeners. Average audience up by over 52,000 listeners in just 3 months. So, I'm not sure what he's talking about there. Now, after a caller suggested that Myska being fired from LBC may have something to do with her criticism of Israel or that particular interview, this is what James O'Brien had to say.
What happened to Sangita, even at LBC? You know,
no, that's just Rolex, mate. And I mean, you can say it because you've got free speech, but that's just crap.
Thank you.
All right. We all sit in. I'll tell you something, because it bores me rigid, this, and I can't believe that certain people have allowed this lie to be perpetuated. We sit in a room every 3 months. Every single person that works here, we sit in a room every 3 months. They show us graphs of how our program is performing. Right? Everybody knows when someone's vulnerable. And it's not the graph of what audience you inherit when you come on air. It's a graph of how your audience falls or rises during the duration of your program. Every single person in this building sits in that room and watches a graph for every single program every 3 months. All right?
I don't want to get off topic.
No, you said it. You can't backtrack now, mate. You have decided you have decided to believe something that isn't true, and the only person that can prove to you that it isn't true has decided to stay silent and allow people like you to believe slurs and anti-Semitic conspiracy theories about her former colleagues. So
I didn't make an anti-Semitic slur or anything.
Yes, you are. You're claiming that someone has been censored or silenced when they haven't.
But that's not anti-Semitic. How's that anti-Semitic? That in itself is what's wrong with everything.
Okay, mate. I am setting the record straight on something, okay? And the idea that somebody would be silenced for being critical of Israel during a phone-in that is heavily critical of Israel is palpably absurd. You can dispute the fact that it's anti-Semitic. That's my opinion. And that is my freedom of speech that I am exercising, just as you are exercising yours. But if you choose to come on this program and tell lies about every single one of my colleagues, I will push back, okay? And that is what you are doing. I sympathize with you because the lies have been deliberately allowed to fester by somebody who can only answer for their own conduct. But it is lies, okay? And if you want to come on this program again, you are more than...
He's such an insufferable prick, isn't he? I really, really dislike that man. Someone so arrogant yet so wrong so often. But I also love how he says, well, you've got the freedom to say what you want, and then continues to talk over him. This is insane. Of course, there is censorship when it comes to Israel and the media. Ever heard of Asa Winstanley? I mean, his house was raided because of his journalism around Israel. Oh, but no! It's anti-Semitic. Sarah, what do you make of all of this? Isn't James O'Brien just so insufferable?
He is so insufferable. He's actually disgusting. Like, and you're so right. When you'd said that he'd said, "Oh, you're free to say whatever you want," and then immediately just talks over the caller to drown him out. I think it dismisses the entire premise as anti-Semitic nonsense. Like, how exactly is that free speech? I think it's performative at best and almost authoritarian at worst. And this is someone who I really want to look into James O'Brien's history, because he has had past contradictions and missteps, and where he's actually praised anti-Semitic content. Let's not forget that last year, James O'Brien himself had to apologise for praising a social media video that contained outright anti-Semitic content and claiming he hadn't watched the whole thing. So if we're talking about accusations for anti-Semitism, maybe he needs to look a little bit carefully and before throwing those accusations at others before they've even been able to finish their point. But what I find really interesting, this kind of goes beyond James O'Brien. I can't stand him. I don't want to waste my breath on someone as incompetent as him. Oops. But I do think there's a well-documented pattern of journalists who take a critical stance on Israel and then face these professional consequences. Mehdi Hassan, people might have their criticisms of him, but he was let go from MSNBC because of his willingness to challenge US foreign policy, including its relationship with Israel. And then there was Mark Lamont Hill as well. He was fired from CNN for speech calling equal rights for Palestinians. So I think it's a fair question that the caller's asking, could the sacking actually be linked to her criticism of Israel? And I think given the ongoing media silence surrounding her dismissal, and I think the broader trend of journalists facing consequences for scrutinizing Israeli state actions, it's not far-fetched.
I'd love for you to enlighten me, though. What was it he said that was supposedly anti-Semitic? I mean, I'm gonna provide what I think he thinks it is, but I'm interested to hear what your response is.
What, the caller?
Yeah, I mean, James O'Brien was like, "This is anti-Semitic."
Can I be completely honest with you? I couldn't even hear what the caller was saying because he kept berating, and it was honestly the sound of James O'Brien just beckoning and bellowing over the caller's voice, I think kind of shows that he is someone who seeks to silence free speech. I didn't hear any anti-Semitic rhetoric at all. Am I wrong?
No, you're completely right.
I didn't hear anything.
I'm going to assume, though. Well, I'm going to assume that James O'Brien was saying this call was anti-Semitic because he's buying into the lie that you can't criticize Israel or Israel will silence you, and it's kind of the sort of it taps into the anti-Semitic dog whistle that they control everything, right? Yes, there is an anti-Semitic dog whistle that says Jews control the world. It's not anti-Semitic, though, to clearly say there is an Israeli lobby in this country. The West, specifically the UK and the US, pretty much do whatever Israel wants because Israel is a settler colonial project, right? The West benefits from Israel being in the region. And we absolutely know that if you were to be pro-Palestine, it's a lot more difficult for you. And there have been, as I said, Azza Stanley is one example. You've brought up Mark Lamont Hill and Mehdi Hassan, who have been kicked out of mainstream media because they've... Look, you can criticize Israel in the media, right?
Exactly.
It's when, though, you attack Zionism, and it's when they deem you going too far. Now, specifically for me, why I think Sangita Myska, I think the whole viewing figures thing is a load of rubbish, is because she specifically held that Israeli politician to account. I mean, I don't know, but maybe that Israeli politician contacted someone and said, we don't like this person. That is a bit conspiratorial, which is why I'm not saying it's a fact. But it was specifically when it came to Iran, right? So for viewers that don't know, last year, Israel attacked an Iranian consulate in Syria. They just did it, right? Unprovoked. It was an illegal act of war what Israel did to Iran, okay? Then Iran fired rockets because guess what? Iran has the right to defend themselves. And the media either largely ignored it or they said, oh my God, Iran's attacked Israel. So Sangita was one of the only few people in the mainstream media that brought up that lie. So it wasn't just about, okay, Israel maybe has gone a bit too far when it comes to Palestinians. No, she called out essentially the entire sort of premise of Israel, which is they are the aggressors in pretty much any war. So I think it went a bit further than that.
Yeah, she dared. Sorry, I just want to come in really quick.
Yeah,
she dared to challenge the official line, right? And now she's gone. But I just quickly on James O'Brien, because we need to be careful of people like him. He's a radical centrist, and these are the sorts of people who portray themselves as truth tellers and these enlightened, like moderates who are supposedly above left and right. When in reality, they're simply reinforcers of the neoliberal establishment friendly status quo.
100%.
Like that is exactly what he's like, and I think. yeah, he's insufferable, but he's actually more than that. He's dangerous because his kind of faux progressivism actively works to keep people uninformed and disengaged. And I think we should be calling that out.
I am so much in agreement with you because I know the right-wing media is a danger, absolutely. And I think that Jeremy Corbyn was the most smeared politician that we've had for a very, very long time. And actually, James O'Brien pushed back on that and said, are you telling me that he's more smeared than Ed Miliband when the Sun accused Ed Miliband's dead dad of being a traitor to the country? And the two things I would say to that is, one, well, I mean, the Sun also accused Jeremy Corbyn of being a terrorist. That's pretty bad. But two, it's not about the right-wing tabloid papers. It's about the BBC. It's about The Guardian. It's the so-called sensible voices and their bias. James O'Brien, still to this day, even though he does acknowledge, because he was on the receiving end of it, that when you do criticise Israel, you'll be called anti-Semitic. A caller called up James O'Brien at LBC, called him anti-Semitic. He was like, what the hell? And he acknowledged for the first ever time, because it happened to him, by the way, that actually some criticisms of Israel gets you labelled an anti-Semite. Yet he still prefaced that with, I still think that Jeremy Corbyn has a problem with anti-Semitism. Even after all of that, he would not do the same to Ed Miliband or any other politician. And then he said any leader of the Labour Party is going to be 20 points ahead. And look where Keir Starmer is now. He's been wrong on everything, but he then jumps on the popular thing later on, even when it comes to Israel-Palestine. For ages, he ignored it, or he was just basically pro-Israel. And then when he couldn't defend Israel, he has now criticised Israel. But it's far too late. People have no fucking integrity when you jump on something so much later. I mean, we were calling it a genocide from day one. Not just that, we've been calling out the occupation of Palestine for 75 years. Well, no. Not that we've been doing it for 75 years, because I'm actually a little bit younger than 75, but we've been saying that it's existed for 75 years. Basically, people who call out when it's unpopular, that's where the integrity lies. James O'Brien has none of that, and now he's smearing this poor man as an anti-Semite. But I wish the caller said this, but I would like for him to say, right, are you going to go on record and say that was the reason why Sangita was fired then? Like, officially on record, is it because of viewing figures? Give me an answer. And James wouldn't be able to say yeah, because he can't officially say that's the reason, especially when the viewing figures was really, really good. So,
absolutely.
Yeah.
He would have spoken over him anyway, even if the caller tried.
He would have spoken it. Of course he would have. Of course he would have. Okay. We're going to leave our stories there, but obviously that's not the end of the show. So we're going to bring in our producer, Lewis Aaron. Lewis, how are we?
Hello, can you hear me?
Loud and clear.
Okay, hello everybody. I'm all good. How is everybody? It's been a good show so far.
We've had lots so far.
Absolutely. We've had so many comments. But what I'm going to do first is obviously do memberships first. So we've got lovely Andy here. He's been a member for 9 months. And we've also got a few memberships that have been gifted as well from Andy. Andy gifted one to Turn Left membership. And also so did Graham. Thank you so much, Graham.
Thank you, guys. Really appreciate it. You guys are awesome.
So I am going to start from the top with the comments. However, I am still keeping an eye on a Trump speech in the background right now, guys, because we're expecting an announcement. But if it's announced, I'll mention it. If it's not announced, I won't mention it. So
okay,
we're going back to the top. So Chris, reform voters are headline readers. This is so true. Who wants to comment?
I want to hear your response first, actually, Lewis.
Okay, I'll go for it.
No,
this is so...
response.
But there's two aspects to this as well. There are people who are just the headline readers, but also as well, a lot of these reform voters, with the section of them who are chronically online in places like Twitter, right? They will see like screenshots of stories without the source. Sometimes it doesn't even say where that screenshot is from. And sometimes it's just like a block of text or a picture with a title. And they just absorb that as absolute truth. Obviously, people fall for this all the time on all sides, but this is way, way more prominent with reform voters. And me and Sarah, we do TikTok lives. We've talked to a lot of these people over the last year or so. And it is frustrating that even to this day, and I'm not just purposely shitting on them just to shit on them, we still haven't found a single reform voter who I would say is well informed. Not one. They might make some good points on certain things about concerns which are valid, about things that they're worried about. But in terms of them being informed on the news and reform and their policies, they've got no clue. They've got no clue whatsoever.
And if there's any Reform voters watching, you can go and debate Lewis on his TikTok, because Lewis is happy to debate anyone.
I know
Yeah,
Nofal's
yeah.
in the I know Nofal's in the comments as well, so we spend some times on panels together as well. Go follow Nofal as well. He does some good lives.
Yes, not
Really
very
good. And he's guested before. He's brilliant. But it's true though. Like I think we spoke about this before in a previous show, that like there is a percentage out there. I think it's like 70-something% will look at a headline and that's it. They've drawn their conclusions. Like even if the 20 or so, I don't know, it's 100 minus 75 minus 100, was that 25? Like the 25% of readers who do go into the article and then read it won't even come out of it understanding what that article is about, because they still got the headline in the back of their mind, and that's what's going to carry that's what they're going to carry forward. Loud, reactionary, sensationalist headlines that scapegoats groups of people, and that's a narrative that will get pushed, and that's the narrative they'll stick to.
So I will move on to Graham's comment. How many people in the general public do we actually think know/care about this reform civil war outside of the politics nerds like us? I think this is really interesting because a lot of people don't know who Rupert Lowe is. He is more famous for the Chronically Online people. I would confidently say his rhetoric is definitely way more right-wing and hardline than Nigel Farage is. And there was actually a poll that came out the other day, which I was actually kind of annoyed at. It was a YouGov poll, which obviously YouGov was founded by a former Tory minister. And it said 33% of Reform voters think that Reform would be better if Nigel Farage was no longer the leader. And then I actually opened up the poll and read the article attached to it. And the poll also said that 21 or 22% of voters definitely think that Nigel Farage would should go, basically. So actually, the headline should be over 50% of Reform voters. I don't know why they tagged it as, do you see what I mean? I don't know why they tagged it like that, but I thought that was a really interesting poll, because we have this idea of Nigel Farage being Reform. He is Reform. If without him it'd be terrible, but we have this poll which says that people actually want to see him go. Anyway,
well, that's interesting, because when we had Helena on the show on Wednesday, we spoke about this, and I brought up that poll, but I didn't see the extra caveat that technically over 50% want him gone, or think the party would be better gone.
So basically, you're a headline reader, Curtis.
I'm a headline reader. That's why I vote Reform. Hashtag jokes. Do not vote Reform. And Helena was saying, well, Rupert Lowe was someone who's, and you're right, like sort of terminally online, and all those people are terminally online, that she wasn't particularly worried about this poll saying that a third of Reform members would think that the party would be better without Farage. What matters is the actual electorate, and which is a good point. But then looking at that, if you're saying that 50% of Reform voters would like to see Farage maybe not leader, that might add a little bit more context. But once again, even Reform voters are still a portion of the electorate. They need to expand more than their 21%, don't they? Of course, to reach other people. But yeah, it's probably a good point that maybe it's only us political nerds. But then at the same time, I think that what was true maybe 5-10 years ago, where you would say Twitter isn't real life, there's go out and touch grass. But now everyone is online 24/7. So in a way, Twitter is real life. Now, of course, the average opinion on Twitter is not the average opinion outside, in the outside world. Of course not. But I don't think there's this big sort of wall between social media and real life when it's what we spend 24/7 on, essentially. And I do think that online life and real life is merging, which may explain partly Trump's victory, because Kamala Harris had a really strong ground game and Trump had no ground game, but he had all the social media and he won. Again, I know that's one little piece of anecdotal evidence, but, in the future, elections could just literally be won on social media platforms.
So we will move on to Becca's comment. So this was in you guys talking about Labour after the general election. So Becca said, I know what you mean, Sarah. I voted Green, but still had a little hope after the general election that things might, against all odds, get better. So disappointed in Labour, not the party of the people anymore. I kind of agree with this as well. Like I do think things have got better than the Tories and the way they handle things, but I expected things to be better than they are, and also not go in certain directions that they have. Talking about, the campaigns with immigration raids, the adoption of right wing rhetoric. Right, I knew that they were going to try and appeal to certain types of voters, but the lengths that they've gone to is quite far. And now you guys were talking about the Malay thing. In terms of people adopting. It was just the other day when they were adopting this chainsaw type of meme, weren't they? The Labour Together, which is Rachel Reeves and that group of people. Now they've absorbed the two-tier policing thing in regard to this new sentencing stuff. That Shabana Mahmood is now using two-tier policing. They've literally gone so far to the right from where they presented themselves to be, that I don't know if things are going to get better, because essentially they're chasing voters who I don't think are ever going to vote for them. And therefore, they're not going to focus policies on us. So, are things going to get better for us? I don't know.
I think for me, though, when this channel started, the first ever video was Jeremy Corbyn's suspension from the Labour Party. And I know we all have our different political areas, but for me, very much, I kept a close eye on the Labour Party from 2015 until today. Right, so since, in fact, it was slightly before 2015. It was the announcement that Jeremy Corbyn was going to run. Before he actually got on the ballot, he just said, I might run. And I was like, oh my God, there's actually socialists left in the Labour Party? What the fuck? And I followed the Labour Party very closely since then. And what I saw from Keir Starmer when he was Brexit secretary, the rumours around him, what he was like when he was younger, in terms of his local CLP, the moves to rip up any sort of democratic gains under Jeremy Corbyn, even before Jeremy Corbyn was suspended, I was very confident that what we're seeing from the Labour Party is fairly similar to what I predicted. Now, they have surprised me in how right-wing they've gone. There are things I'm like, I didn't expect them to go this right-wing, but I was never, ever under the impression that the Labour Party would be adequately better than the Tories, given as well the fact that Keir Starmer's career, and he mentioned it in that clip earlier on because he can't stop talking about it, that way he was Director of Public Prosecutions. But that was a red flag for me, because he was very much imbued in the establishment. So I was never surprised that, I was never of that thought that, okay, the Tories are out, maybe slight sigh of relief, maybe things won't get worse. And closer when we got to the election, I was like, no, I think actually in some areas it's going to be worse than the Tories, because the Labour Party want to be seen as the grown-ups in the room, right? And they feel like they have more to prove. So when you're hearing Wes Streeting in the Commons saying, we're doing things that the Tories were scared to do, as if that's sort of like a good thing, and like, oh my God, you're actually being more Tory than the Tories. I expected that, because they are so obsessed and they want to prove to people in the media pundit class that they're the grown-ups in the room, that they're going to cut more than the Tories, and that they attack the Tories on the fact that they've spent too much. So all these signifiers led me to believe that actually I think that this could be a more right-wing government than the Tories. Now, of course, I'm not going to make that holistic suggestion now, since we've had 14 years of Tory rule and we've only had less than a year of the Starmer project. But I do think they've become more right-wing in certain areas. I do think that Keir Starmer, and I've held this for years now, that Keir Starmer is to the right of David Cameron. And if we were to look back on, if they get a second term, if we were to look back on 10 years of Labour governance, I think we could probably comfortably say that they were more right-wing than the Tories, because the Overton window has moved to the right and they're chasing it. Could be very wrong. You never know. The Starmer supporters tell me, don't worry, he's going to be left-wing when he gets in. Maybe in a year's time, he suddenly turns into a radical socialist. But I hold my breath.
I don't know. No, I don't think that's going to happen. Like, come on. Labour have repackaged austerity. They just put a bow on it, and they do it behind this really, really, weird spot. And I'm sorry. Like, if Starmer actually believed in an effective state, he wouldn't be making £6 billion worth in welfare cuts. So I was keeping corporate tax breaks intact. He wouldn't be letting Wes Streeting, who's taken hundreds of thousands from private healthcare donors, shape NHS policy. I don't trust the Labour government. And the thing is that it's hard for me, because I was quite a staunch Labour supporter back in the day. Now I'm not, because they are emulating right-wing politics that I don't resonate with, and that I think doesn't resonate with the working people.
That guy almost brings us on to Nofal's comment as well. Which is
Nofal's in the chat. I actually didn't see he was in the chat.
Great.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Oh, I didn't hear you say that.
So yes,
thank you, Nofal. Good to see you.
To fool people that his neoliberalism will be any different whilst triggering austerity under the guise of efficiency. Apparently, it's different as the markets will listen to Labour.
Well, Helena brought up a really good point on Wednesday as well. We were talking about GB Energy and how much of a scam it is. And basically, the idea for GB Energy was going to be a lot of sort of public involvement in the management of investments, right? Again, not a bad policy, just not particularly radical. And she just went to Davos, and then a bunch of capitalists said, no, don't use don't use the public sector. Like, give us the contracts. And she went, yeah, all right. So Nofal's absolutely right, and kind of mirroring what Sarah's been saying. It's just repackaged neoliberalism, and it's not. I mean, and the market. Well, I mean, the markets will listen to Labour. I guess the participants in the market, i.e., the private capital, are listening to Labour because they give them a shed load of money. Rather, Labour's actually listening to private capital. But yeah, you're both right. It's just repackaged neoliberalism.
And also as well, someone pointed out the other day to me, like, they're talking about, they're the party for the workers while also trying to introduce all this AI to replace everybody.
Right. I mean, that was going to be incorporated in one of the stories today because it was about, we care about jobs, creating jobs. And now they're talking about replacing with AI. Are you fucking serious? Like, this is, because when, I can't remember what minister said, what minister said it when defending the benefit cuts. They were like, well, the clue is in the name. We are the party of work, which, by the way, is a complete bastardization of Labourism. They're the party of workers, not work. But if you're the party of work and jobs, well, how do you explain fucking AI, the decision for AI to take over people's jobs? Literally. Maddening.
Sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but you have to laugh. I mean, I laugh because your delivery is brilliant.
I don't know.
No, exactly. If I don't laugh, I'll cry because honestly, what world are we living in at the moment? What world are we living in? It's
there's
true.
There's a alternative timeline where Bernie Sanders finished his second term, Jeremy Corbyn is still hobbling on as prime minister, and yes, it's not a socialist utopia, but the US have just introduced Medicare for all. We've brought in water, energy, trains back into public ownership. Minimum wage is £15 an hour. In an actual investment. That's the alternative timeline, but we got stuck with this one.
So just as a quick side note, Trump's speech is now finished. The reason why I was keeping an eye on it, if anybody hasn't seen the news, there's been multiple sources saying that Trump was going to, in the next 24 hours, but this was yesterday, announce the enactment of the Aliens Enemies Act, which would give him just basically quite tyrannical powers, essentially. But he hasn't announced it. He could still announce it tonight, maybe, and I'll keep an eye out. But now I don't have to follow the speech anymore, which has been a very boring speech. We were moving on to the story about Malay. So Vicky Clee put, I like that these protests brought two rival football fans together, which is true. I read about this as well. But again, there's almost like another aspect to this story, right? You guys were talking about earlier that, the country's a mess. You've got all the crazy right-wing libertarians who are sharing memes about how amazing Argentina is and how wonderful Malay is. But actually, I bet most of them haven't even seen these stories because it's not in their algorithms and in their media.
Exactly.
But one part of this, this amazing moment where people are coming together, football teams protesting with pensioners, is that do we have to wait for it to get this bad, to get Argentina bad, for people to actually come together and rise up and protest and try and make change? I don't want it to get that bad first. I want to rise up before.
Do you want to know something quite saddening as well? When I was researching for the story, I was reading one of the articles, and it said that Milei's personal poll ratings hasn't really been affected. He still has pretty high poll ratings. And I'm thinking, how? Like, he's got everything, and now he's going after pensioners. I'm really perplexed. But this does remind me of, in the 80s, the queer community aligning with the miners. I love that. I love when you see sort of coalitions that you wouldn't usually expect. And you've got football fans, standing with pensioners. But as Vicky points out, rival football fans, they put their differences aside for the common good. That, to me, despite the destruction in Argentina and despite the hell that Milei is unleashing on the country, that does give me hope. I absolutely love that.
There's also a film about the miners and LGBTQ community.
It's a fairly newish film, isn't it? I think isn't
Yeah,
Corbyn on Letterboxd now,
the film?
and he reviewed it.
No, it came out. The one I'm thinking of came out in
Pride.
is it not 2014? Film called Pride.
Well, yeah. Sorry, when I say new,
yeah.
I mean I'm talking about like in the last 20 years. Yeah, Pride. Yeah.
Yeah, so before Trump, even ran. Yeah, but 2014 is quite a while ago now. Okay, sorry. Back to the comments. I've lost where I was now because I was googling the name of the film. Starmer's neoliberalism. Okay, so Edward. So-called libertarianism are essentially just fascists. Fascism is a counter-revolution of private property, as W.E.B. Du Bois. I'm sorry, I'm really bad. I can't read that.
Web Du Bois.
Web Du Bois said. Anyway, no, this is so true, and I have found it so interesting, guys. That, and Sarah might have seen this too, just because we're more chronically online than Curtis in certain ways. Is that I have if you actually look. No, guys, if you look at the subscribers on Reddit for like anarchism and stuff like that, and ANCAPs and all these types of people, it's on the rise massively, and it's because part of this pipeline that especially a lot of young men are going down, whether it's all the way to crypto to libertarianism, it's funneled lots of people down the ANCAP thing, and because they've been convinced that basically any version of government is a form of oppression, and therefore we should have complete freedom, and then they get to anarchism, and it's so prevalent now, and it's so common, and it's so frustrating because you literally just give them one hypothetical of why it doesn't work, and it all collapses in front of their face, but they don't care. They have a cognitive dissonance.
Speaking of chronically online, have you seen those Twitter accounts, which is like New Hampshire libertarians, whatever, and different states, and they got libertarian. But actually, like when you look at some of their content, it's pure just Nazi posting, and people like scratch a libertarian, find a fascist, which is also really annoying because actually the libertarianism, its origins within left-wing thought, and actually libertarianism has been hijacked by the right. I think someone in the comments actually said that, like they did identify with a libertarian, but now they can't because of the right wing. It's why I identify as a libertarian socialist. Fuck, I can't get my words out. And the reason why is because socialism is about liberty for all, and I don't want to drop that term just because some fascists do. But yeah, libertarianism is actually its origins within left-wing thought. Alyssa Gucci, Curtis's Chronicle on Twitter, but not online. That is my partner, so she knows. She knows better than anyone else.
But I do. That's so funny. That's hilarious. Yeah, she's calling you out. I'm so glad she's
calling me out on the live.
But I want to just come off of Edward's point just really quickly because Du Bois is actually really interesting. I've read him back in university, so it's quite a while back now. But the thing is, it's like capitalism is essentially, it serves the dictatorship of the rich, it will enslave the majority of the people to serve the economic elite, and I think it obviously hides itself behind promising individual freedom, but only for those who actually own capital. So I would absolutely agree. The way that libertarianism has moved is that it's absolutely, essentially it's just fascism at this point. So.
Fascism, corporate fascism, whatever flavor fascism, but it's not liberty for all. We can guarantee that.
Yeah.
I got this one up for you, Curtis, because I know it'll trigger you. Only a couple James O'Brien.
I bet he was. I bet. I want to get the rate that Jeremy Corbyn is paying because he's living rent free in everyone's minds.
Actually, still being mentioned.
So yeah, I wanted to come to this comment because I wanted to comment on the James O'Brien thing as well, because I do think it is such an interesting case because obviously we know that the stereotype exists, right? The very anti-Semitic stereotype of, Jews control the world, Jews control the media, yada, 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 which, as we know, is anti-Semitic and is ridiculous. But the issue that we have is that Israel is inflating and spreading and harming themselves by using their influence to influence media, which they have. We don't know what happened to Sangita. We don't know for sure. But what we do know is, and why people can come to that conclusion with Sangita, is that we've got multiple stories of Israel lobbyists, and Israel affiliated people being involved in the media. We've got Owen Jones, who's done multiple stories about one of the editors of the BBC, right? One of who has been known to edit stories and kind of basically make them like less human, essentially, when talking about Palestinians. We've got cases of people trying to influence the BBC on things. Obviously, we had the recent thing with the documentary on the BBC. We've had reports going back 10, 15 years of Israel putting pressure on governments to basically punish BBC reporters or presenters on their coverage of Israel. We have so many stories that tie into this, and that shouldn't be conflated with Jews control the media, and it needs to come with nuance. But obviously, LBC set themselves up for failure with that, because when that conspiracy or that suggestion was going around, they didn't fill the space. And when you combine what Israel has been doing with its influence with LBC not responding to why Sangita actually left, they set themselves up for that failure. So if people want to believe that, they can believe that. I think if people start going around saying, Jews control the media, that's one thing. But suggesting what happened to Sangita could have been some sort of influence, I don't think is unreasonable from what we've learned over the last few years, especially.
Yeah. And I think that Sangita would have said, oh, no, like I was let go because my...
sorry, I said her name incorrectly.
I think she would have happily said the reason why she's being quiet, because she can't overtly say it. And obviously, James O'Brien had a pop at her saying, well, she could come out and confirm it. Well, maybe you're the one that's lying, James. He
needs to censor himself. That's what he needs to do. Censor.
He needs a full-on 100% censorship, and we never hear from him again.
Does. Like, just shut your mouth. Anyway.
Yeah, there was one really famous, the most famous case of Israeli lobby influence in the UK that I ever saw, I think, if anybody else in the comments wants to come up with another one, was when we used to have a law in place where if you think there is somebody in the country who's committed an international war crime or crimes against humanity, you can actually just apply to a judge with the evidence that you have. It could be like a UN report or something like that. And when a former Israeli minister, who was the former foreign minister, this is going back 10, 15 years now, was coming to the country, a group of people tried to enact this law, went to a judge, and the judge actually issued an arrest warrant before this person came to the country. And immediately they intervened. The person didn't come. And then couple of years later, the Tory government, because this happened actually under Labour, and by the way, David Miliband had to apologise to Israel. Shame on you, David Miliband. They changed the law. And the way that they changed the law is that they can give special envoy status to somebody who is a literal war criminal or an accused war criminal coming to the country. But that vote only passed by one vote in the House of Lords, and they had to pull a guy from the Lords out of a party during the evening of that vote to make sure that it passed, and it only passed by one vote. And that was from the influence of the Israeli lobby. They all lobbied for this. Multiple Israeli lobby groups did this, and it only passed by one vote. So now any Israeli can come here who's accused of war crimes, and the government's just like, here you go. You have a special status. Doesn't matter what you've done or what you've been accused of. We can protect you. Anyway, sorry, that was a rant, but it exists. We know it's there. Yes, Vicky, it was Zippy. I think that's how you pronounce it. Zippy. Sippy. Yeah, it was a woman. She was the foreign minister at the time. It was during the 2008 attack on Gaza.
Sorry, the comments are coming quite quickly, and
I'm actually really happy that everybody knows this story actually as well already.
Yeah,
it's a really interesting
story. Really good insight, Lewis. Honestly, really great insight.
Anyway, do we have any more comments? I'm asking myself that, by the way. We got another
yes,
from
Randude. What a legend! 10 turn left memberships.
Legend.
You're a hero.
Thank you so much.
You're paying for these suits. Just kidding.
And also, did I put this one up earlier? I don't think I did. So Graham mentioned about Starmer's wee little smug chuckle.
You got a little football reference there, didn't you?
Yeah,
I picked up on that too.
Like, oh, look at me! I'm a Liverpool maker. I'm a man of the people.
Look at me! I'm relatable. I play football.
That's what all the
Do you know what?
politicians do. It's like whenever I used to see Boris Johnson with a pint in his hand, or Nigel Farage with a pint in his hand, I'm like, oh yeah, you're for the people. Shut up.
Do you know what's my most annoying Starmerism that really annoys me now is that when he says either very or many, he says it like 2 or 3 times, and he's like very, very, or many more, many more, very, very much.
I mean, he does the classic politician, which is just to be clear, and then he proceeds to not be very clear. But he does it to the max, doesn't he? He's like the best at it. I will give Starmer credit. He's very good at that. He says he's going to be clear on something, and then he spends the next 5 minutes just doing like a little word waffle exercise.
Great skill.
Yeah, I actually listened to that full interview with these agents, and it was just waffle. It was just waffle. Do you know what's really interesting is that I read and I listen to so much media because I have nothing better to do with my life, and it is interesting seeing like how much praise he's getting right now, especially obviously around the international stuff. And like,
but is that within the media pundits though, isn't it? Largely,
yeah. This is the thing. Like, obviously, I think he's done better than I expected, but I don't think he's like they're almost like making him out to be like this completely new person. And I'm kind of like
journalism, isn't it?
Yeah, it's just a bit frustrating. Oh yeah, actually, I want to bring this up actually because Becca's just put this up. Did you hear about this? Did you see Emily Thornberry this week has been secretly recorded in Israeli private parliament and uploaded?
Did you not see this? That's a great spot. We need to look into that.
Yeah, Becca, correct me if I'm wrong because I didn't fully read it. I read like a few little snippets about it, but basically, yeah, she went to like a meeting with and I think this happened when she was in Israel, in private, and they recorded her saying like it was something along the lines of like I go out of my way to buy Israeli products. Like she was like really like trying to like be all like look at me, I buy loads of Israeli stuff, and basically they released this recording of her like bigging up Israel.
Oh my God.
So was she angry about?
Doesn't surprise me though, but
was she angry?
Yeah, Owen Jones did a video about it too.
Oh, he did. I can't believe I missed that. Because I'm terminally online. I'm constantly looking at stories, but I think because it's so, and this is why it's hard when there's only 5 of us. Like, we can only focus on like niche-ish stories. We can't cast a really wide net because there's literally only 5 of us. So I feel bad that I didn't see this though, because this is really, really funny. And I definitely would have brought it up on the show had I known.
She got so mad about it as well. It's really funny.
Oh, that's incredible. I love it.
About that, so not the atrocities that are happening.
But yeah, oh God, there's so much going on in Israel right now as well. I could talk forever. Okay, I think
yes, Vicky, good shout. Start tagging me. And actually, this is the thing because we say this a lot. You can message us on social media, or you can email us contact@turnleftmedia.co.uk for any stories. So actually, one of our stories was a young man who made a petition about the genocide. And then he was like attacked in the media, in like the Financial Times or something. No, it wasn't the FT. It was another publication. And we found out about that story because we were contacted. And it's a really good way of doing sort of grassroots journalism.
Absolutely.
Because we don't have the resources to cast a wide net. So, yeah, Vicky, please start tagging me in things, or just send a link to our inbox on Twitter, Instagram, Blue Sky, or our email, because there will be things we miss. Do you have a subreddit or anything like that? We don't have a subreddit, but we're talking about doing a Discord, which I do not want to handle because I don't understand it. But we've been talking about it for a while, though, to be fair. But we need to do it because this could be really good, where we can incorporate our viewership to bring in more stories.
Yeah, definitely, because there's just so much going on. This is the problem as well. People always miss so much, but especially when so much is happening, and you kind of get you get siloed sometimes. And like as well, because like even when it comes to the Israeli stuff as well, it is really good for people to point out these stories to us, because sometimes we get distracted as well. We might be focusing on Ukraine or domestic stuff or Trump, and these stories do get missed, and we need to make sure we keep covering them.
I mean, Lewis, you're a Discord guy, aren't you? You're not, are you?
I've never actually ran a Discord. I've got Discord, but like I'm not a good typer. As in, like I actually prefer voice-based communication, which is why I spend so much time on TikTok.
Well, I mean, people are saying Reddit or TikTok. I'm not sure. I heard maybe Discord could be better, as you can have multiple different subsections. Again, I don't really know about it, but I think this is something we should actually start to do, because we can start to really incorporate our viewership on things we might miss. Because I'm actually annoyed. I wish I'd seen that Emily Thornberry video because that's so fucking funny.
By the way, as well, just to throw it out there, just because we've been talking about it for 2 years, and I read so much, Israel is now investigating the use of its IDF soldiers using people as human shields. Just to let you know, after years of denying it,
it's a bit of a sort of marking your own homework sort of thing, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. And also the
at least they're acknowledging it, I guess, because that very admission is like, yes, they are using human shields.
Is this the 5 stages of grief where they're just like
5 stages of grief,
deny, and then it's anger, and then it's like, oh, maybe it did happen. It happened.
Yep. Yeah, but the media was sort of probably largely ignored that bit, weren't they?
I
have we got any more
comments? I think that is it. I think it is. Yes.
Nice.
Well,
thank you, guys.
Thank you, Lewis.
Really nice. Thank you, Lewis.
Been a phenomenal show, guys. But that is all we have time for. I want to thank all of our viewers who tuned in and also who contributed. You've contributed massively tonight.
Massively.
I also, of course, want to thank Sarah Dalal, our newest TL contributor. We love you.
Oh my God,
and she has a new camera as well. She has a new camera. Oh my God.
Nice. I made it. Now I need to figure out the mic.
It.
Joking. Bit by bit. Yeah. Happy to be here. Honestly, it's so great.
Do you know what? I'm seeing the people in the chat, the comments, seeing what we've built so far, even though there's no money in it. I'm so proud of what Turn Left has become. I think as well, as time goes on, it's harder and harder to gain sort of influence within social media. I think if you started a YouTube channel 10 years ago, it was easier then than it is now because obviously the market is getting even more flooded, right? And we're not in a particularly favorable position to start sort of anything big, but we are trying, and I believe we will get there 100%. I mean, look, we're approaching 20,000 subscribers. You know, that's 11,000 or 12. No, I think it's 14,000 in 1 year. So it took 3 years to get to like 6,000, and then it took 1 year to get to 20, and it's sort of, you know, snowballing. But having people like you, Sarah, part of the team, and Lewis, and obviously everybody else, Callum and Cog, is just amazing, and it's we're all the better for it. But of course, our viewers, who've been incredibly generous in the chat tonight. I think it's been a really good show. I think we've got that Friday feeling, which we can let go of the terrible politics for the weekend, for some of us anyway. I know Lewis will be reading 24/7 over the weekend. Andy, thank you again for another Turn Left membership. You guys have been fantastic, but we're going to let you go because it's been an hour and a half. I've also got to catch up on Severance. If you haven't been watching it, I recommend watching Severance. And also the reason why I've gotten Severance is because it's anti-capitalist. That is the sentiment behind there. So I hope you guys have an incredible weekend. We also have something very exciting tomorrow. It's going to be our first show of Sarah's. Bring Sarah in quickly a second. It's going to be our first show with Sarah. Do you want to just give the audience a brief little?
Yeah, I can do. So I think one Saturday every single month, I'm going to now do a women's debrief where we're going to discuss all things to do with women and center women's voices in that. And tomorrow we have a really interesting story that I think has unfolded over the past week about the gym girl spot and the taking back her statement about having trans women in the gym. So I've got an incredible individual from the trans community who is coming to, because I think what's missing from all of this is centering trans voices in something that actually impacts them. So all things to do with women, I'm super excited to chat about that on Turn Left and outside of TikTok. So yeah, super exciting.
Yeah, so make sure you tune in tomorrow. We're not sure when it's going to go up, but it will be sometime Saturday evening. So watch out for it. I'm really excited. But, okay, I'm going to let you go because I've got to watch my show. You guys have got to do whatever you've got to do. Anyway, I'm waffling on. Again, thank you to all our viewers. Thank you to Sarah. And we'll be back on Monday with Normal Island at 7:30 p.m. So, thank you so much. And We'll see you next time.
Support independent media. Support social justice that's there on social media. Thank you. Turn left.